Welcome back, dear watchers, to the place where shadows hold their secrets and fear finds its voice. I am the Wicked Watcher, your guide through the darkness, where every tale is more chilling than the last. Are you ready? Let the story begin.
I never had what most people would call a happy childhood. Some might even say it was tragic, and I wouldn't argue. There were things I kept to myself, buried memories, hidden wounds, things I never spoke about in school or to family. I carried them in silence, because when I was a kid, I was beaten. My stepfather, a man I'll call Roy, was a master of cruelty. He never raised a hand when my mother was home. Then his torment was purely psychological. But as soon as she left, it was open season. He would lock me in my room for hours without food or water, scream in my face until I thought my ears would bleed, and if he was in a particularly bad mood, he'd let his fists do the talking. His favorite trick was to make sure he never left a mark in places that people would see. I was 6 years old, helpless, trapped. I tried running away once, bolting out the door the moment I saw his car pull into the driveway. I barely made it 2 blocks before I was dragged back, and the punishment that followed still haunts me. My mother never intervened. I didn't know if she was too afraid or if she just didn't care. But there was one thing, one strange, inexplicable thing that kept me from completely falling into despair. I remember the playroom. It happened after one of Roy's worst beatings. The first blow had sent me sprawling onto the floor, my vision blurring, the ceiling lights fracturing into a dozen tiny stars. I closed my eyes, waiting for the pain to end. And then, suddenly, I was somewhere else. The walls were painted a faded blue, peeling in some places, and the floor was covered in a checkerboard pattern of gray and red tiles. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered softly, casting an unnatural glow. A sign hung above the doorway, "Welcome to the playroom. Have fun forever." It reminded me of those old indoor arcades, complete with bumper cars, ball pits, and rows of video games flashing in the dim light. But something felt off. I couldn't place it at first, so I pushed it aside and did what any kid would do in my place. I played. I climbed jungle gyms, slid down twisty slides, and lost myself in the flashing screens of arcade cabinets. For the first time in years, I felt safe. But no matter how much fun I had, my eyes kept drifting toward a darkened corner of the room, a place where the overhead lights didn't reach. I didn't go near it. Eventually, a crackling voice came over the PA system. "Attention, children! The playroom is now closing. We hope you had fun. Remember, we'll always be here when you need us." And just like that, I woke up, back in my room, sore, battered, but smiling. The playroom was real. It had to be. I needed it to be. As time passed, I visited the playroom more and more. Every time Roy laid his hands on me, I escaped into that strange place. But things began to change. At first, the games would be different. New music played over the loudspeakers. The ball pit felt deeper. Then, one day, I wasn't alone. I met 3 other kids, Daniel, Sarah, and Jonah. They told me they had been coming here for a while too, that the playroom found kids like us, kids who needed somewhere safe. It wasn't safe, not really, because the dark corner in the room was growing. At first, I barely noticed it, but with each visit, the shadow stretched further. It swallowed the climbing frames, then the arcade cabinets. By the time Sarah pointed it out, an entire half of the playroom was gone. That night, as I was leaving, the PA voice came on again, but this time, it was different. "Attention, children! The playroom is now closing, but remember, stay away from the dark place." I wanted to ask what it was, what was hiding in there, But before I could, I woke up. And then Roy left. My mother told me he had been arrested for something terrible. She didn't tell me what, and I didn't ask. For the first time in years, I felt safe. I almost forgot about the playroom. Almost. Then one day, I came home from school and found him sitting in our living room. Roy was back, and before I knew it, I was on the ground again, blood filling my mouth, stars exploding behind my eyes. But this time, before I fell into the playroom, one thought broke through the haze. What if this time I didn't wake up? The playroom was different. The children were playing as always, but the room had shrunk. The darkness had consumed everything except a small patch where we huddled together. I saw it then, something moving in the black, a shape shifting, crawling, thousands of tiny limbs clicking against the tile. It was made of dolls, not just dolls, children's toys, little stuffed animals, plastic action figures, old wooden puppets. Their tiny hands moved unnaturally, their hollow eyes glowing with something I couldn't understand. And they were hungry. It moved fast. The other kids didn't even have time to scream before the thing was upon them.
Daniel vanished into its gaping chest. Jonah tried to run, but was snatched up by 100 tiny fingers. Sarah grabbed my hand. "We have to go," she shouted, dragging me toward the last remaining light in the playroom. But it was too late. The thing lunged, its plastic hands gripping my wrist, twisting until I felt my bones snap. And then, "Thank you for playing in the playroom," the PA voice whispered. "See you again soon." I woke up in a hospital bed. My arm was in a cast. My mother sat beside me, her face streaked with tears. "Baby, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore." I wanted to believe her, but even now, decades later, I still see the playroom in my dreams. The dolls still whisper to me in the night. And then last week, my son brought something home. A dollar. A doll that looked just like me when I was a child, even down to the little cast on its arm.
Arjun never believed in spirits. He laughed off his grandmother's tales of the Chayini, a vengeful shadow that preyed on those who wandered too close to its domain. But everything changed on a fateful night in his remote village. The sky was pitch black, the stars hidden behind thick rolling clouds. After a long day working in the rice fields, Arjun took a shortcut through the dense jungle, hoping to reach home before the storm rolled in. Towering banyan trees lined the path, their twisted roots snaking across the ground like the fingers of something unseen. His oil lantern flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the damp earth. Then he heard it. A soft, lilting hum drifted through the trees. It was hauntingly sweet, yet sorrowful, like a lullaby forgotten by time. Arjun froze mid-step, his pulse quickening. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. Something inside him told him to turn back. But something stronger, curiosity, or some unseen force, pulled him forward. The melody grew clearer as he reached a clearing where an ancient banyan tree loomed over an abandoned well. Its roots coiled tightly around the stone structure like a monstrous cage. That's when he saw her. A woman in a ragged white sari sat on one of the tree's thick roots. Her long, unkempt hair draped over her face, obscuring her features. She swayed gently, humming that same eerie tune. "Miss!" Arjun's voice wavered as the word left his lips. The humming stopped. Slowly, the woman turned toward him. The strands of hair parted just enough for him to see her face. Pale as the moon, eyes sunken and hollow, lips curled into an unnatural, twisted grin. Then she laughed. The sound was low and guttural at first, but it quickly grew, swelling into a chorus of voices that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The wind howled as if the jungle had come alive. Arjun stumbled back, his lantern slipping from his grasp. The glass shattered, plunging him into darkness. The laughter turned into a piercing wail, ringing in his skull as he turned and ran. The jungle seemed to fight him. Branches clawed at his skin, roots tripped his steps. The air turned ice cold. He didn't dare look back, but he felt it, her closing in. Then, suddenly, he burst into the village, collapsing onto the dirt road. The wailing stopped. The jungle behind him was silent once more. The elders gathered around as he gasped for breath, his words tumbling out in frantic whispers. The village headman, an old man with knowing eyes, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You should not have walked near the well," he murmured. "That tree is cursed. It belongs to her." That night, Arjun lay awake in his hut, the melody still echoing in his mind. Just as sleep began to claim him, a breath of cold air brushed against his ear. "I'm not finished with you." By dawn, Arjun was gone. The only trace of him was a set of footprints leading back into the jungle, ending at the ancient banyan tree. For days, whispers spread through the village about Arjun's fate. Most accepted that he was lost, another soul claimed by the Chayini. But his younger sister, Kavya, refused to believe it. On the 7th night, she lit an oil lamp and prepared to do what no one else dared. She would find her brother. Armed with a sacred talisman blessed by the village priest, she stepped into the jungle. The path was unnervingly silent. Even the usual chorus of insects and frogs had vanished. As she neared the banyan tree, the air thickened, suffocating her with an unnatural stillness. Then the humming began. The melody slithered through the darkness, wrapping around her like an unseen hand. Kavya swallowed her fear and stepped into the clearing. The well loomed before her, its abyss darker than the night itself. "Arjun!" she called. The humming stopped. From the shadows of the tree, the Chayini emerged. Her hair, long and matted, shimmered like oil in the dim light. Her grin was wide, too wide. "You should not have come," she whispered, her voice a blend of sorrow and malice. Kavya held up the talisman. "Where is my brother?" The spirit laughed, her body shifting like smoke. "He belongs to me now." Kavya's gaze darted to the tree's trunk, and her breath caught. Faces, dozens of them, pressed against the bark, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Among them was Arjun. His terrified eyes met hers. "No!" Kavya lunged forward, plunging the talisman into the nearest root. The Chayini shrieked, her form writhing as tendrils of darkness lashed out. The tree groaned, its roots curling inward as if in pain. "You cannot save him," the spirit howled, "but you can join him." The ground beneath Kavya's feet gave way, dragging her toward the well's gaping maw. Ice-cold hands clawed at her ankles, pulling her into the abyss. Desperate, she clutched the talisman and screamed a prayer. A blinding light erupted from the charm. The shadows recoiled, the Chayini howling in agony as her form shattered like mist in the wind. And then, silence. Kavya awoke at the forest's edge, gasping for breath. The banyan tree stood still, its cursed faces gone. Exhausted and grief-stricken, she stumbled back to the village. Arjun was lost, but she had freed his soul. From that night on, no one dared to step near the well. But on moonless nights, the wind carried a faint melody through the trees, a mournful whisper of those who had been claimed. And in the stillness of her hut, Kavya sometimes heard a familiar voice. "Thank you, sister."
And so the tale comes to an end, though the shadows it casts may linger in your mind. Be wary of the darkness that surrounds you, dear watchers, for it often conceals the truth you dare not face. Until next time, remember, the unknown is always watching, and so am I. Sleep well, if you can.